Perfect. So, as Katie said, I'm Alexander. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Mist, and we're a company providing AI-powered spinal diagnostics. So this all started with my own personal journey. When my brother and I were young, we were both diagnosed with scoliosis, and unfortunately for the both of us, after years of conservative treatment and going back and forth between different physicians and getting multiple different imaging studies done, we both ended up receiving surgery. And we're not alone. There are 24 million individuals in the US that are imaged for spinal conditions each year. And we know from the literature that these measures are time consuming for physicians, often taking anywhere between 10 minutes to 15 minutes on average to do and to do full reports for, which contributes to radiology backlogs. On top of that, in the literature, it's also reported that inaccurate measurements can cause further progression of pain or deformity. And we've had our own internal study that was accepted to AANS this year to further validate that. And lastly, these workflows are further inhibited by antiquated technologies and protocols. For example, when I've had my imaging, it's always been on CDs, and it's 2021. No one really has CD drives on their computers anymore. So this inhibits data transfer between physicians as well as directly to patients. At Mist, we solve these issues in two big ways by combining imaging data with clinic data in a big data play. From the imaging perspective, we've built a platform that processes images in less than 10 seconds with approximately 95% accuracy. And from the clinic data perspective, we're building a teledata app that allows us to screen patients for better care, as well as to track patient progression over time and determine who may or may not need surgery faster for physicians. This allows us to do three main things. First, we can provide predictive outcomes. We can look at a patient on day one, look at their imaging and baseline clinic data study, and say in 6 months, how well will this patient be doing? Will they need surgery? We can quantify qualitative metrics that are currently used in physician offices and provide insurance with numeric indications that helps them determine whether procedures are required. And lastly, we can improve diagnostics. So for conditions that you might not be able to detect if you haven't done an imaging study, from a clinic data perspective, we can indicate to physicians that those imaging studies may be needed in the first place. From the imaging perspective, we've built a robust computer vision machine learning model on a repository of about 10,000 images right now, with 50,000 images in our pipeline from our current partners. In order to utilize the software, physicians can upload an image to our current MVP that's a standalone platform, and we're working with companies right now to build out API integration into current picture archiving and communication systems. Our model then performs landmark detection using key point feature detection. We then perform the spinal measurements and automatically generate a PDF report that can be appended to the EHR. And lastly, we allow physicians to verify measures, share insights with patients, and take manual measurements if they don't agree with our measures. In terms of clinical validation, from a coronal X-ray perspective, we've demonstrated a median error of 2.67 degrees, which represents a 47% reduction in error when compared to the literature reported in current clinical measurements. From a sagittal perspective, we've demonstrated a 2.91 degree median error, which represents a 42% reduction. And overall, that equates to just above a 93% accuracy. And we've also shown through our studies that we have a 6.38 average processing time for these images. Compared to our competitors, such as AI-assisted tools like Nuvaline or EOS Medical, which have an 82% accuracy, as well as competitive research in this space, which has about an 86% accuracy reported in the literature, we have significantly better data quantity, which allows us to provide better accuracy through our machine learning models, as well as data quality. So the robustness really comes from a wide array of partners rather than using a single data set that really hinders a lot of the robustness that other competitors have. In terms of our product timeline, we've built out our coronal and sagittal algorithms. We're starting to look at developing CT and MRI capabilities, specifically MRI for soft tissue disc herniation analysis, and we'll continue to build out our teledata platform as we look to the future. In terms of IP, we filed our provisional patent. We're collecting an additional 50,000 images through our partners like CTIP, a conglomerate of West Coast hospitals, and the United States Air Force, from which we won an AFWorks SBIR grant and are working with the director of neuroradiology there to continue with that grant process, as well as bring our technology to the DoD joint hospitals. And then in terms of regulatory, just last week, we had our Q-Sub. We're anticipating a 510K submission early next year and approval in mid to late 2022. We're working with 7 hospitals currently across the East Coast, always looking to expand. So if you're interested in piloting with us, we'd love for you to reach out. In terms of funding, we've gathered $171,000 in non-dilutive funding to date. We're applying for an AppWorks Phase 2 with the Director of Neuroradiology for $750K, and we have a fundraise planned in Q1 of next year. And we're looking at potential exits with companies like Nanox, which acquired Zebra Medical, NuVasive, and Stryker Spine. In terms of our team, we have experience across machine learning, cloud computing, data science, clinical studies, as well as the medical backing to bring this technology to market. And our scientific advisory board consists of the Director of Spine Surgery and Director of Residency at MedStar Health in Georgetown. And if you're interested in joining our team, piloting with us, or have any additional questions or want to meet, please reach out to me at my email above. And thank you again for the opportunity to present today.
Alexander, thank you so much for being here. We definitely have some great questions from our audience tonight. I'm going to start with one of my own because one of the things that I love about all three companies tonight is this ability to not only improve efficiency for providers, but also accuracy. And your product is no different. So why is what you are doing so difficult that no one else has put together a fully automated system like this?
Certainly. So from a machine learning perspective, I wouldn't necessarily say that it's so difficult that competitors can't take advantage of strong computer scientists and build out technology. The really key moat that we have is this data, because it takes a significant amount of time to label the data, gather the data, and we use a special form of key point detection that analyzes approximately 60 pixels in the 4 million pixels that make up an X-ray. So we're detecting a very, very small percentage of those pixels, which on top of the data quantity also makes the algorithmic development significantly harder than your classic segmentation or landmark detection models.
Very cool. And another question that I'm going to merge with a question from our audience. So talk a little bit more about how this fits into the clinical workflow. And specifically from one of our attendees, can the reports and images be pushed to an X-ray or view box for the surgeon to view during surgery?
Certainly. So we're currently working with various partners that are building data integration layers on top of your current PACS systems to bring this directly into the workflow. As of right now, we have a standalone platform, but we know that physicians tend to love technologies that integrate perfectly with the current system. So we're working on developing that right now, and that would allow us to return to the PACS system both the PDF report that has the full analysis, as well as things like these overlays, which then, as this question asks, could be pushed forward throughout the process and continue to be shown on the PACS systems. Yes.
Fantastic. And we have a couple of questions about your business model. So would the sales model be per image processed, or is it a subscription model? Actually, two of our attendees asked the same question. So maybe you can address that first.
Yeah, so this would be, at least we're anticipating a subscription model based on volume. So we have estimated a price based on salary and other items per image, but when actually charging hospital systems or radiology practices, we roll that up into a monthly SaaS fee.
Fantastic. And another question, talking really about other use cases. So is this translational to spine anatomy? So how well does that work? And then the other question really was around, sorry, I'm trying to get back to it, but clearly imaging and clinical outcomes post-op don't always correlate. So talk a little bit more again about, do you have any future planned studies to make sure that you really are improving outcomes? So other use cases, translation to other areas, as well as how are we correlating this to actual outcomes?
Certainly. So from the first perspective, we're looking at what the data that our images already has in it. So a lot of our spine images already have areas like hip, head, and neck in them, which we can use to detect, hip fractures, other sorts of injuries, and moving translationally into those industries. And then from the second question, let me see if I can see in the chat. The correlation. So we're currently working with MedStar in Georgetown, and through this AppWorks proposal, we're going to be launching a study with the entire Air Force's data set to start to look at correlation and determine what that actual correlation is. And it's less about like, can we correlate exactly, and more about, can we triage and flag the patients that may need an earlier surgery and should have more dedicated physician time to determine their outcomes.
Well, and lastly, a question from our audience that's near and dear to my heart. I'm assuming this can be used for pediatrics as well as adults, but maybe talk more about that.
Certainly, yeah. So we actually started off with pediatrics. That's why our initial focus was a coronal algorithm, because typically pediatric spine, you're looking a lot at scoliosis and idiopathic scolioses.
Sure.
Started off there, and then we soon realized that from a market perspective, the geriatric market and spinal conditions related to triple D are significantly larger. So we started focusing on developing both sagittal and coronal simultaneously. But all of our FDA submissions and everything include pediatric patients as well.
Fantastic. That's what I like to hear. Thank you so much, Alexander, for being with us tonight.